Hello, this is a video explaining how to play the card game Moo. I've played this a lot in the last few years, and I looked all over the place and could not find any videos teaching how to play it, so I figured I'd make one of my own. I haven't seen it sold anywhere by itself, but in these two packages, Moo and More and Moo and Lots More, in which it's packaged with other games. This one has Moo and 4 other games. This one has Moo and 3 other games, and the other games are different in each case. This one's out of print, Moo and More, very hard to find, but Moo and Lots More you can find on Amazon right now. Cost about 30 bucks, but I think it's worth it. They're pretty fun games. Obviously Moo I like a lot. Niet is a very well-known, well-regarded game. My favorite game in the Moo and More, other than Moo, is one called Last Panther, which is basically a variant on Hearts. So if you get either of these, you're getting a bunch of games in one, including Moo. I'll show you what the cards look like. The deck of cards is not a standard deck. Instead of hearts, spades, clubs, and diamonds, there's just red. There's 5 colors, basically. You have 5 suits. Red, yellow, black, blue, and green. And in every set, they go from 0 to 9, except for there's 2 1s and 2 7s in each of the 5 suits. So it's a 5-suit game instead of 4 suits, like a regular deck of cards. And you'll also notice these little triangles. I call them pips, like the dots on dice. The different cards have different numbers of pips. The 1s and 9s don't have any. The 6s and 7s have 2, and everything else has 1, and that's important for scoring. So that's what the Moo deck looks like. 0 through 9, 2 1s, 2 7s. The 6s and 7s have 2 pips, the 1s and 9s have none, everything else has 1 in those 5 suits. So before we talk about Moo itself, I'll give a brief overview of trick-taking games. If you already know what those are, it'll just be a couple minutes. If not, that'll help. If you're learning Moo as your first trick-taking game, that's a bit complicated because it's probably the most complex one I've ever played much. But it's not too bad because the basic ideas of trick-taking are pretty simple. So I'll give a quick overview of trick-taking games using this regular deck of cards, and then I'll give an explanation of the rules for Moo. I won't go much into the strategy of Moo just because that would take a long time, and there are a lot of nuances to the strategy. I might make a separate video with strategy tips, but this video will pretty much just cover the rules of Moo. So let me start by talking about what trick-taking games are in general. Trick-taking games are basically, let's say you have 4 players. Each player puts down a card, and whoever has the highest card in a certain suit, usually the suit of the first card played, wins those 4 cards. And 1 card played by each player, someone takes them, that's called 1 trick. So if you have a deck like this, 52 cards, if you deal it out to, let's say, 4 players, you each get 13 cards, you'll play 13 tricks, and that's called 1 round, or 1 hand, a handful of cards, and then you repeat. So for example, I'll just throw bunches of cards, not dealing them out exactly, and they would usually be in your hand. So let's say each of these players has their hand of cards. What happens is somehow you pick a player to lead, and that player just, usually it's either the dealer or the player to the left of the dealer, depending on the game, plays a card. Then everybody else in turn has to follow suit. That means they have to play a card of the same suit. So if he plays a jack, this person has to play a jack. And usually high card wins. Let's say he doesn't have a higher jack, so he's like, oh well, I'll just get rid of one of my low ones. And then this player will play, he looks through, has to find a jack in his hand. These are new cards and they do not shuffle very well. Does this guy have any jacks? He has no jacks. Well, if you don't have any of the cards of the suit led, you can play whatever you want. So if this were the game of spades, for example, he might just say, oh, I don't have to play a jack because I don't have any, so I can play a spade. And this guy will play a jack because he has a jack, so he has to play a jack. He has to follow suit. Well, Usually, the highest card played of the suit led wins that trick and will take those cards. But in a game where you're playing with a trump suit, that means one suit that beats everything else. For example, in the game of spades, spades are trump. Well, this guy would win. Even though 5 is lower than jack or 10, it's a spade, and spades are trump. That means they beat everything, so he would win. He would take these 4 cards, and then he would get to lead the next suit. So let's say he led with a jack of clubs for whatever reason. Well, if the next player has any clubs, he has to play a club. And, does he have any clubs? He's got to have some clubs. There's the king of clubs. So he plays that one. This guy plays the 6 of clubs. This guy plays the 2 of clubs. Well, the king is the highest card of the suit led, and there were no trump cards played to beat him out, so he wins that trick. And he takes those cards into his win pile, and he leads the next trick. And so on until all the cards are done, all 13 tricks if you have 52 cards and 4 players, and that's one round. And then at the end of the round or the end of the hand, you score, and different trick-taking games score in different ways. Some of them you just count the cards you won, some of them you just count the number of tricks you won, different things like that. In some games like spades, you need to look at the cards dealt to you and try to predict how many tricks you'll win, and you don't want to go under or even over. In some games like hearts, you don't want to win because the more cards you get of the heart suit are counted against you. So that's basic trick taking. So we'll get these cards together. So some of the main terms that we talk about: a trick is just one time around, everybody plays one card, and the high card of the suit led, if no trump cards are played, wins that trick, takes those cards, and starts or leads the next trick. But if any trump cards are played, the highest trump card played wins that trick and then leads the next trick. And that's the basics of all trick-taking games. There's nuances that are different from one game to the next, and scoring is different. And now I'm going to give you an example of playing Moo. I've dealt out some different hands of cards. Moo can be played with 4, 5, or 6 players. So what I've done here is I've just dealt out cards for a 5-player game. In fact, some of the older versions have rules for a 3-player game, but it really leaves out some of the main elements of Moo that make it fun, so I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend playing it with 4, 5, or 6, and there are 60 cards on the deck. Again, each of the 5 colors goes from 0 to 9, so that would be 10 cards, but remember there's 2 1s and 2 7s, so there's 12 cards of each color, so there's 60 cards. And you always deal them all out. So if you're dealing with 5 players, they each have 12 cards. 4 players, they each have 15. 6 players, they each have 10. And the cards would be in your hand. Everyone else would not get to see them. But I'm just laying these hands face up just so I could show you what the different players might do. Now when you play Moo, it's a lot more complicated than a simple trick-taking game like hearts or spades. You have each player looks at his hands, and in Moo, there are 2 phases to each hand or each round. First, there's a competition to see who gets to say what trump is, because unlike spades, for example, where spades are always trump, or some other games where a certain suit is always trump, it changes from hand to hand in Moo. So for this hand, as we play all of these cards, maybe blue will be trump, or maybe yellow will be trump. It can depend, and each player looks at his hand and decides what he would like to be trump based on what he has a lot of, and he bids, I'll explain that in a minute, to try to get that to be trump. Now, a couple differences between Moo and other games, in that in Moo, you don't just need you're not just limited to a suit or a color being trump, like blue or yellow or green or black or red. You can have a certain number being trump. Let's say 5s are trump. That means a 5 will beat any other card, no matter what. So you could have a color or a number be trump. And another thing that's different about Moo is that there are actually 2 trumps. There's a major trump and a minor trump. So let's say blue is the major trump, and red is the minor trump. That would mean that all blue cards beat, even the lowest blue beats even the highest red. All blue beat all red, but all red beat everything else. So even the lowest red would beat the highest of green, black, or yellow. I keep calling this yellow, even though it looks orange, because in most decks it does look yellow. This is just a different version than I'm used to. Or numbers can be trump. So let's say fives are major trump and ones are minor trump. That means all fives beat all ones, and all ones beat everything else, even nines. So there's major trump and minor trump. They can be numbers or colors. And it gets a little complicated when you have one as a color and one as a number. You can have that. Let's say, again, for example, let's say blue is the major trump and fives are the minor trump. Well, all blues beat all fives and all fives beat everything else, except when you have the major and minor trumps, one is a color and one is a number, there's going to be a crossover. So if major trump is blue and minor trump is 5, the blue 5 is the crossover, and that becomes the most powerful card in this whole hand, in this whole round. So if blue is major and 5 was minor, the blue 5 would be the best card, the strongest card. It beats anything. And then after the crossover card, we actually call it, when we play, the Uber, which is German for over or above. It's over and above everything else. So the blue 5 would be the Uber. It would beat everything else. And then you go to the major trump. You go to the blues, starting from 9s down to 1s. And then below the blue 1 would be all the 5s, which the 5s of the other 4 colors other than blue, and they'd all be equal to each other. And then everything else is below that. So the crossover, or the Uber, is the best, if there is one, followed by the major trump, followed by the minor trump, followed by everything else. And notice that I've said some cards are equal. For example, in this case, the yellow 5 and the green 5 would be equal if they're both played in the same trick, 2 equal cards. Well, whichever one is played first would win. For example, another example is that with the blues, there's 2 blue 7s. Well, if they're both played at the same time in the same trick, the first one played would win. So that's how the 2 trumps, major and minor, work in Mu. And one of the more complicated and nuanced parts of Mu is how we determine what the 2 trumps are. With every hand, after the cards are dealt out, the players look at their hands and they think, what would I like to be trump? And it's either a number or a color that you have a lot of, basically. They look at their hand, they think about it. Not every player might have something they really see they want to be trump, but now is where they bid to determine who gets the right to determine trump. So this player might look at his hand. Let's say this is the dealer. He would bid first. He looks, what do I have? 2 0s. I have a few 7s. I do have 3 7s, but there's 10 7s in the game. I don't have a lot of any one. I have 4 7s. 7s might work, but nothing's really standing out. I think I'm going to pass. I'm not sure what I want to be trump. Then it goes to the left. This player looks at his cards. What do I have a lot of? Wow, 1. I have like 5. This guy has like 5 1s. I think I want 1s to be trump. I'm not going to tell anybody that. But if you want to choose trump, if you want to get in that competition, you have to bid by placing a card face up in front of you that everybody can see. And it doesn't have to be the one that you want to be trump, but as you do bid cards, whoever bids the most cards gets to choose trump. Whoever bids the second most cards gets to choose the minor trump, and they have to choose it from what they've bid. So this guy right here, if he gets to call either major or minor trump, it can either be greens or 1s. Those are his only choices. Now let's say it comes to this guy. He's looking at his cards. 6, whoa, he has a few blues, and there's another blue. Wow, this guy has a lot of blues, including a 9, a 6, a 7. He has some of the highest blues. He thinks he wants blue to be trump. So he wants to bid more than this guy. So he's going to put down a couple cards, Ooh, he has a few zeros too. Yeah, let's say blue. So he's going to put down a couple cards, and at least one of them has to be blue if he's going to want to choose blue. So he's bid 2 cards now. So he's now in the lead to get to call trump. So if everybody passed, and that's when the bidding stops, he put up 2 cards, he put up 1, he would get to choose the major trump, and he can choose either zeros, threes, blue or red, and he would choose the minor trump, and he could choose either ones or green. And actually the minor trump chooses first, so the person who gets to choose major trump can see what that was before he chooses major trump, because sometimes he might have a couple options, and it could depend on what the minor trump is. But let's say this guy over here looked at his cards. He's like, what do I have? What do I have? I don't... A couple nines. Well, that's just always good to have. I don't have a lot of any one thing. I think I'll pass. I don't want to be in the competition to choose trump. Let's see, this guy, 5, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 2, 3. Oh, this guy has 4 of the 5 fives. If 5 is major trump, I have 4 of the 5 of them. I like that. So I want to put down, I'm going to put down 3 cards. One of them has to be a 5, but I might not want to put down 3 5s. Sometimes you don't want people to know what you're planning. So he's going to put down 3 cards. So he's now in the lead in choosing trump. So again, these cards would still be in his hand. No one can see them, but these would be placed in front. So he's bid 3 cards. Remember, this guy passed. Now this guy or girl is looking at his cards, and he's like, 8, 7, 0, a couple zeros, 1, 9. I don't have a lot of any one thing. I'm gonna pass also. Now, unlike some games, when you pass, when it comes back around to you, you can get back in. The bidding is only done when everybody consecutively passes. Now we get back to this guy. He's like, I like my ones. I have 5 of them. Do I really want to bid 4 cards to so I can say 1 is major trump? And you might be asking, well, why not? Just bid more so you win. Well, you don't necessarily want to bid too many cards. And this is a key point to the bidding, because the more cards you bid has 2 disadvantages. One disadvantage is you're revealing more of your hand to the opponents, so they can know what you have, and that's never good in any trick-taking game. But the bigger disadvantage, you can see on this scorecard. The scorecard right here tells you how many points you have to get depending on how many cards you bid. So if you look at the second column that starts with the 5, that is for a 5-player game. And you look up here, this says how many cards you've bid to try to have the right to call trump, and you get to be called the chief. Well, if he bids 4 cards, he is going to have to get 33 points. And what that means is, remember those little pips, little triangles on all the cards? There are 60 of those in all the cards, and you and your partner, and I'll explain partners in a minute, would have to get 33 of those 60, more than half if you bid 4. If everyone passed and the bidding stopped right now, this guy would get to call trump. He would get to choose major trump. He only bid 3 cards, so him and his partner would only have to get 30, exactly half of the pips in order to win this round and get bonus points. If you don't make the goal, you lose the round and get negative points. So you don't want to bid up too high, because you're increasing the amount of points you're going to have to do, the amount of tricks you're going to have to win, how well you have to do in order to win the round. And that gets pretty hard. Like if you bid 8 cards, you have to get 45 of the 60 pips. And that's very hard. It happens every once in a while. So this guy's really thinking through. Does he want to put up his 4th card and commit to getting 33 pips? He's like, I have 5 ones. I have half the ones in the game. I'll have half the major trump. Odds are my partner will have 1 or 2, because there's a lot of ones out there. I think I am. So this guy, he puts down a few more cards, and maybe, it doesn't really matter which ones. Maybe he puts down a couple 7s to trick people into thinking maybe he's going to call 7s for major trump. Because sometimes, if the other players don't know what you're doing, that gives you an advantage. So now we're back to this person. He really has a lot of blues. He wants blue to be major trump. So what's he going to do? does he really want to put down 5 cards, thereby in a 5-player game, committing himself to 36 out of the 60 pips? Him and his partner have to win 3/5 of the points. He thinks he can do it. So he's gonna kind of tip his hand a bit. He's gonna go up to 5 cards and he's gonna show all of these blues. He has some high blues, so people know he's going blue, or they assume that's a good guess. And why would he want to do that? To make it obvious what he's doing? Well, we'll get to that in a second. So we come back to this player, and he doesn't have much, but you know, he does have a couple 9s. So he's going to put these 2 9s up. Now, why would he do that? Why would he put 2 9s forward? It's already, he's not in first or second place. Well, that shows that he has some pretty strong cards. Even if those aren't to trump, he could win a black hand and a green hand pretty easily. So maybe whoever is the chief will choose him as the partner. And again, we'll get to that in a little bit more in a minute. This guy's like, okay, this is too rich for me, I'm out. This guy over here, he looks and he sees, this guy's going blue. He has 9, 7, 6. You know, I have the 8 of blue. I have the second highest blue. I'm going to just bid that 1. I'm not trying to become chief or even to call the minor trump, but I want him to know I have this. So maybe he'll pick me as the partner. This guy's like, okay, it's too rich for me. I pass. He passes. He passes, he passes, he passes. Everybody's done. Everyone passed in a row. So we're done with the bidding. So now we look at the cards. He bid 5 cards. That's the most. He's going to be the chief. He calls the major trump. This guy bid the second most cards. We call him the vice. He gets to call the minor trump. So what the chief does, well, first the vice calls minor trump, then the chief calls major trump, and then the chief picks one of the other players to be his partner. And you'll notice this is a 5-player game, so the chief and the partner, they'll be outnumbered. There's only 2 of them against 3, but that's okay because the chief gets the advantage that the major trump is going to be something he has a lot of. So this player says, so these 2 players are out of the bidding. This player says, okay, I will call 1s to be minor trump. That's what this player, who we call the vice, is. And then this guy says, okay, well, I will call blue to be the major trump, and I'll pick this guy as my partner. So these 2 are the chief's team, and since the chief bid 5 cards, again, in a 5-player game, they need to get 36 of the total pips in order to win this hand. And if they don't, they lose and get dinged. These 3 people will be on the other team. So now everybody has their hand of cards that you can't see. They keep these cards in front of them, but they're as though they're in their hand, and they could play them during tricks just as they play a card from their hand. So the chief leads, and now if we go through an example of how this might look, let's see, get these out of the way a little bit, move some of these. Let's see, what do we do? The chief, he might say, okay, I am going to start off by playing, let's see, either a blue or a 1. Well, I have this 9, that's the best blue, but do I want to play that yet? Because remember, even though blue is major trump and 9 is the best blue, it's not the strongest card this time around. Blue is major trump, 1s are minor trump, but there are 2 blue 1s that are the best cards, the ubers. They beat everything, even the blue 9, because they're the crossovers. And this guy over here, with all the 1s, one of his was a blue 1, and he's pretty smart. He knew he might call blue, and he knew he'd have one of the ubers. But the chief got lucky in that his partner has another one of the blue 1s. So how will this play out? Well, let's say the chief says, I'm just going to try to win this. I'm going to start off by playing my 9. Well, since he led, remember, you have to follow suit. If he played a red card, everyone would have to play red. If he led with a black, everyone would have to play black. Same with green, same with yellow. Now with blue, it's mostly the same thing, but it's a little trickier. Blue is trump. So everybody else has to play a trump, but that means they can play a blue or a 1. It's as though the blues and the 1s are combine together to make one suit called the trump suit. So for example, this guy over here, he can play this red 1. And this guy over here can play his blue 2. This guy over here, he has some blues, he has some 1s. He doesn't want to use his uber yet because he would just be taking this from his partner. So he just plays another 1. And then this guy over here is like, aha, I gotcha. You had that blue 9, but I called 1s as the minor trump. I have one of the ubers. I'm going to play this. So I win this trick. So this guy takes that trick, and now he gets to lead the next suit. And he looks around, and he looks around, and he sees, oh, look over there. That guy who's on my team has the black 9. I'm going to lead a black. So everybody has to play black, and my teammate will win. But what he doesn't know is this guy, the chief, he lucked out. He doesn't have any black, so he doesn't have to follow suit because he can't. So he can play anything. So he's going to play one of his 1s. He's going to save the blues because blue is major trump, 1 is minor trump, so the blues beat the 1s. He's going to play this. Everybody else has to play black. And this guy, he's like, oh, I'm going to win this with my black 9. Oh man, he didn't have any black, so he was able to, we call it trump in on this trick. So I'm not going to waste my black 9. I'm going to just play my black 3. I have to give a black. This guy has to give a black. And this guy has to give a black. Now he has a black 6 and a black 0. Well, he sees that his partner over here is going to win this trick. So he's going to put in the 6 because that gives his partner 2 pips or 2 points. So this guy over here wins this one. And now he takes that. So now he gets to lead the next time around. And it's like, what should I do? Well, I have all these blues. I could play my trumps. The 9 is gone. One of the ubers is gone. I see my partner has that 8. So I'm going to play one of my low trumps. So everybody else has to waste a trump. And my partner just might win it. Well, unless somebody else has the other uber. So this guy over here, he looks. He has one more trump. He has a 1. He has to play that. This guy, he'd rather give a 1 away because those aren't as powerful. But he doesn't have any left. So he has to play a blue. And now this blue 5 is beating this blue 1, but this guy over here, he could win with his 8, and he does. And so this guy over here, he's like, well, I'm sure not going to give my blue 7. I'm not going to give him 2 points. I'm going to just play one of my 1s. So they all had to play trump because, again, trump was led. So they all had to play trump. This guy takes it. And now these 2 guys are wondering, I know there's another blue 1 out there, a blue 1, another uber. None of these people chose to play it to take this trick. Well, this guy knows why, because he has it. This guy is now thinking, I bet my partner has the other blue 1 because nobody else chose to play it. That's pretty cool. So this guy takes this, he puts these away, he takes them aside, and he leads the next trick. And there's, he has a, let's just play a regular old non-trump, let's just play red. So I'm going to lead with a red 9. Everybody else has to play a red. So this guy plays a red. His partner plays a red. He plays a red. He plays a red. So he wins that one. That's a simple case. And then they go on and on. They go around until everybody's played all of their cards. They're all collected. And then everybody counts, not how many cards they have, how many pips. Because remember, the 1s and 9s have 0 pips. The 6s and 7s have 2. So the number of cards you have is usually close to the number of pips you have, but not exactly. So they count it up, and we compare it to this scorecard. And again, the chief and his partner, since the chief bid 5 cards in trying to claim trump, they have to get 36 pips. If they get 36 pips, they achieve their goal and they get bonus points for the round. If they do not get 36, if between the 2 of them they add up all their pips and combine them, they have 35 or less, the chief gets penalized and the opposing team gets bonus points, and the chief's partner just nothing either way. And another tricky thing about Moo, or no, it's not tricky, it's just a little complicated, but pretty easy once you pay attention, is how this bonus scoring is done. And let's first deal with the case where the chief and his partner do obtain the goal. So let's say the chief and his partner did score 36 or more pips. Well, all 5 players get the score for the number of pips, and then we add any bonus scoring. If the chief and his partner got the 36, then they get bonus points based on how many cards were bid. Now remember I said when you bid more cards, that makes it harder because you're setting a higher standard for how many pips you need, but you get more bonus points. In this case, they bid 5 cards. The chief and his partner would both get 50 points, 10 times the number of cards bid. But it's not always that way. It's at least that way, and it could be more depending on what was chosen as major trump. The other side of the scorecard explains this. If major trump was a color, that's the easiest thing to call for major trump because there's the most of those. You have 12 major trump if you pick a color. So you do get just 10 times the number of cards you bid. Or if you bid 5 cards in trying to be chief, you get 50 points. But as you choose different trumps that have less cards available, therefore making it a little harder on yourself, you get more bonus points. So if the major trump is a color, if you bid 5 cards, you get 50 points because there's 12 of those. If the major trump is 1s or 7s, there's 10 of those, a little less, you get an extra 10 points, so you get 60. If the major trump is any other number, there's even less of those, there's only 5 of those, you get 20 extra points. So if you bid 5 cards, you would get 70. And one thing we hadn't mentioned yet is if major trump, if you just say no trump, what's that mean? Well, after the vice calls minor trump, if you're like, you know, I don't mind that one. I actually have a lot of those too. We'll just go with just that one trump. We don't need a major trump. You say no trump. And that doesn't actually mean there's no trump. It means the minor trump's the only trump. But then you're not saying any cards in your hand other than any minor trump you have are the trump. So all that is to say, there's one trump called the minor trump, which becomes the only trump. So whether you call it minor or major doesn't matter. And then the chief would get 30 extra points. So if you bid 5, 80. So the more cards you bid and the more restrictive thing that you call for major trump leads to more bonus points if you do get at least the number of pips required. So in this case, if they did achieve it, since blue was major trump and he bid 5 cards, if they get at least 36 pips, the chief and his partner would each get 50 points. But let's say they didn't. Well, let's say, what do we do when the chief and his partner fall short? Well, in that case, it depends how far they fell short by. See, if they do make their bid, if the chief and the partner combined got 36 pips, anywhere from 36 to 60 doesn't make a difference in how many bonus points they get. They'd get more points by counting the pips, but the bonus would just be the way I just described it. But if they miss, it depends on how many of these levels, how many of these boxes they miss by. So let's say they had to get 36 pips between them, but they only got 28. So they bid 5 cards. This is in column 5, but we say, oh, 28, they only made a 2 bid. They only got at least the number in column 2. So they missed by 3 levels from 36. They didn't get 33, they didn't get 30. They did get at least 27. So they missed by 3 levels. If that happened, then the chief would be penalized minus 30 points, 10 times each level he missed by. All the members of the opposing team would get bonus points, half that amount. They would all get 15 bonus points. The chief's partner, just 0 either way. He's not penalized like the chief, but he doesn't get the bonus points like the opposition. So that's how the scoring is done. That's how one hand or one round of Moo goes. All the cards are dealt out. There's a phase where you put cards in front, trying to get the right to say, I want to be chief, I want to determine major trump. At the end of that bidding, major and minor trump are called, the chief picks a partner, and then they just play. The chief leads the first trick, everybody plays a card, and then each trick, whoever wins that person leads the next trick. You do it until all the cards are played. Add up your points. Everybody, all the players get a point for every pip they collected, and then either the chief and his partner get bonus points if they made their bid, or the chief gets dinged and the opposition gets half of what the chief loses in bonus points. A couple more things about the bidding. When they were doing the bidding for Trump in the first place, I forget the cards we put out, but remember This person put out 5, so he got to be chief and he got to call major trump. This person put out 4, so he was the vice. He got to call minor trump. And the other people just, they put out less, so it doesn't matter. Well, that's the simplest case. Somebody clearly has the most, somebody clearly has second most, and then everybody else has least. So that would be the chief and the vice and neither. Well, let's say 2 people had each put together 4 cards. Okay, he put out 5 and they each put out 4. Well, he's still chief because he put out the most cards. But in determining who's vice, who gets the right to be called to call the minor trump, they each put out 4 cards. So then we look at the individual numbers. We don't add them together. Let's see, this would be 19. This would be 23. This guy has a higher sum, but this guy has the highest individual card. You go by the individual card. This guy has a 9. This guy's highest card is an 8. So this is the vice. He calls minor trump. Then, and his choices are 3s, 2s, 9s, 5s, or red, if these were the cards. And then after he calls minor trump, this person would call major trump and be the chief. And his choices are 2s, 3s, 6s, 7s, 8s, green, blue, red, or no trump. Those are all the options he has. It has to be something in front of him or no trump for the major trump. So that's how the bidding goes. If there's a tie for vice, you see who has the highest card. If they both had a 9, you would see who has the highest next card, and so on and so on. Individual cards, comparing them one at a time. You're not summing the total cards. But let's say the bidding goes and it's still open. Everyone hasn't passed. He has 4, he has 5, he has 2. He puts out another one. He has 5. He passes, he passes. Now it's tied for the most. Well, what happens? Do we break the tie for chief the same way? No, it doesn't work that way for chief. To determine who the chief is, who gets to call major trump, there has to be one person with clearly the most cards. These both have 5, and it simply can't end that way. The rules say it can't. So if he put down a 5th card, if he created a tie, he could just put down 6 and say, I'm taking the lead. But if for some reason, and there's various reasons, he put down 5, he passes, he passes, he passes, he passes. When it comes back to him, we say he's on the hook. He made the tie, so he has to break the tie. Now, when it got back to him, he could be like, oh, no, you don't. You're not tying me. I'm putting down a 6th card. I really want to be chief. But if he didn't do that, he lets the tie go. When it gets back to the person who made the tie, he has to put another card to break the tie. Or if he doesn't, if he's like, I can't go up to 6. That would require me to win so many pips. I can't do it. I'm going to lose. He forfeits the entire hand and takes a penalty, and we deal him out and start all over. And if he did that, he bid 5 cards and he created a tie and he didn't want to break it. Maybe he was hoping this guy would bid 6 to push him up to more pips to a higher requirement that he couldn't meet. But this guy didn't fall for it. So if he refuses to break the tie that he created after everybody goes around and passes, he created a tie with 5 cards, he gets a negative 50-point penalty. And the person or persons he was tied with get half that plus 25-point bonus. So you cannot have a tie for the most cards for chief. If someone makes a tie, when it comes back around, if it's still tied, they have to break it. However, if one person has the most, which is 5, you can have a tie for vice, the second most, in number of cards that is. And then you look at the individual values to see who is going to be vice and call the minor trump. And if it happened that they all had exactly the same hand, a 5, a 9, a 2, and a 3, if he had a 5, a 9, a 2, and a 3, if it was exactly tied for second, then there's no vice. There's no minor trump. It doesn't go to the next most cards played. And what that means, and the chief would really like this, there's only one trump. We'd call it the major trump, but again, if there's only one, doesn't matter if you call it major or minor. There's only one single trump because we say vice was canceled. So the chief would just call the one and only trump, pick a partner, and they'd go ahead and play. And when that happens, there's no minor trump that somebody else has a lot of. The chief almost always wins. So that's not a good thing to let happen if you're not going to be the chief. But again, I don't really have time to go into a lot of strategy at all in this video. I might make another strategy video at some time. So let me see, what else did I cover? So I talked about bidding For to be chief and vice, to call the major and minor trump, you can't have a tie for chief. You can have a tie in number of cards for vice. Then you look at the individual cards. If the exact numbers are all tied, there's no vice and no minor trump. The cards that you bid during that process stay in front of you the whole time, but again, you can play them on any trick as if they're cards in your hand, and all the other cards are just kept in your hand so no one can see them. Something I mentioned earlier, again, sometimes even if you're not going for the most or second most, you might want to put out a card or two as advertisement. If you think you have cards that match up well with the chief and you want him to call you his partner, you could put out a card to show that. Like this guy over here, he saw that this guy put out the 9, 6, 7 of blue. He's going blue. I'm going to show him I have the 8 of blue. Maybe he should have shown him he had the 1 of blue also, suspecting that minor trump might be ones. So you could play cards even if you're not trying to have the most, usually for that reason. And that's the bidding process. And that reminds me, people always ask, what game is Moo like? Well, it's really kind of a unique beast. It's not like any other trick-taking game very much. But if I had to pick one that it's kind of like, I'd probably say Pinochle, because Pinochle has a phase where you're bidding to see who gets to call trump. And then the second phase is you actually play the tricks to collect the cards. So that's probably the one trick-taking game it's most like. But if you've played Pinochle, you can already see it's very different. So that's Moo. Trick-taking game for 4, 5, or 6 players. Again, there's a 3-player variant in older versions that doesn't have a minor trump, which is one of the main things that makes Moo unique. So I really don't like that. So it's best with 4, 5, or 6. I like it with 4 or 5. With 6 players, each player only gets 10 cards. And it's very often happens that you look at your hand right away and you don't have a lot of anything, and you say, oh, well, I'm not gonna win any tricks this round. This is gonna be a boring one. So I really like it better with 4 or 5, and even 4 when you have the most cards. Oh, and one thing, as you noticed, I kept talking about how the chief picks his partner. Well, every single hand, the partners are different. Other games, like if you play spades, for example, it's played with 4 players and 2 sets of partners sitting across, and you play multiple hands until a certain score is reached, and you have the same partner the entire time. Most partner-based trick-taking games, you have the same partner the entire time. You know who it is right at the beginning of each hand. It's whoever's sitting across from you, as most of those games have 4 players. But in Moo, it can change from hand to hand, and usually does, and that's kind of fun. And so at the end of each hand, you write down everybody's score from the pips they collected and bonus points, and then you just play another hand. And there's no real rule as to how many hands you play, just how much time do you have. If you have an hour, you can usually get in 4 or 5 hands, 4 or 5 rounds. Some trick-taking games you play to a fixed number of rounds or to a fixed number of points. In Moo, it's just how much time you have. So that's what makes this game really flexible. I often will play at lunch at work, and we'll just, if we have time to get in 3 hands, we do. If we have time to get in 5, we do. If somebody's late and they join after the first hand, we go from 4. Now we have 5 players, and they just jump in. It kind of messes up the scoring a bit, but yeah, we're playing for fun anyways. So it's really flexible in that sense. 4, 5, or 6 players, and people can come and go between hands if you don't mind not being able to keep an exact score for the whole day, if you're just playing for fun. And you'll just notice this video, I pretty much just talked about the rules. The strategy of this game, the nuances are pretty deep. I've played this probably once a week for 5 years. That's a couple hundred times. Each time we get in 4 or 5 hands, I'm probably approaching 1,000 hands of this game. And I think I'm actually pretty good at the strategy, but I'm still learning new things, new nuances. I see people that have played it actually a lot more than me, and sometimes I'll play a card and they'll look at me and they'll say, why'd you play that? I'm like, I don't know, I thought that made sense. And then they'll explain something to me. So there's a lot of depth, and especially in the phase where you're bidding to try to choose major or minor trump. Just looking at the cards in your hand, you know, taking 10, 12, or 15 cards, if it's a 6, 5, or 4-player game, looking at your cards and being able to say, what do I have that would be good to be major trump from this hand? That's a very, that takes a lot of experience playing this game a bunch of times. Sometimes you look at your hand and say, I don't have something that would be good at major trump, but I have something that would be good for the minor trump, because I have a few of them, and I suspect I know he's going to call blues. So if I call ones, I'll be able to have an uber, because having the uber or the crossover is really powerful. Sometimes you want to call minor trump just to give yourself one of the crossover cards. Sometimes you don't have a good hand for major or minor trump, but you have a couple powerful cards that are powerful on their own, like a couple nines. So you're like, that's just helpful. Maybe I'll put those down and the chief will pick me as partner because I have a couple really good cards. So there's so much strategy and thought that goes into the bidding to be chief or vice, to be major or minor trump, and to be able to look at your hand and tell if it's a good hand to enter that bidding or just keep passing this round and not even enter it. That takes more time to figure out than the actual second phase of each round, the tricks. The trick taking, just how to play each card and which card to play. There's a lot of subtleties to that too, but that's actually the easier part to figure out. So that's the game of Moo, trick taking game for 4, 5, or 6 players. Oh, I just realized I didn't mention, I definitely want to mention the authors of this game. I don't know if you can read that too well from the top of that box, and I'm sure I don't know how to pronounce these right. Doris Matau and Frank Nessel. They've both authored a number of games. There's a couple other simple card games, Frank's Zoo and Ark, that are really good if you like, fun card games like this. Doris in particular is probably better known than a game designer as a game artist. She did the artwork on these cards. If you look closely at the cards, they have these, let's see, what is that? Those are horses, unicorns, dragons, panthers. What is this? There's neat artwork in the middle of these cards, and a lot of other games she's done, whether it's cards or boards. Just really cool. She even did the cute little artwork on the cover. Any game I see with her name on it, whether as a designer or the artist, I immediately consider buying it just for that. So that's Doris. I think that's called, they say Matau. It's German. Looks like Mathaus. I think it's Doris Matau and Frank Nessel. They did a great job in designing this game. So again, Moo and More is going to be hard to find. It's out of print. You can sometimes find them on eBay. There's some on the Board Game Geek marketplace, but usually from Europe, where more of them are still in circulation. This Moo and Lots More is easier to find. You can get it on Amazon right now, like I said earlier. And if you're just trying to get Moo, it doesn't really matter which one you get. If you look up the other games than Moo into the two sets are different, so that could sway you one way or the other. Again, even if you can't find that one. So if you like Moo, go ahead and buy one of these and break it out. Find 3 to 5 other people who like or want to see if they like trick-taking games and give it a shot.